What do you think it is about London that keeps drawing you back?
We will become the poster child globally of mixed use. I hate that there's always this pitting of London against the country.
What do you think London needs?
Hello, I'm Jace Tyrrell, Chief Executive of Opportunity London and a global urbanist.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome, Jace. I'm going to start, if I can, with a quote from you. So people say you go to Paris to be a Parisian, you go to New York to be a New Yorker, but actually you come to London to be yourself. So can you give listeners a sense of what that person is that London has allowed you to become?
Gosh, that's a nice leading question to get going, isn't it? But my father was in the Foreign Office, so I grew up all over the world. So we're in Kenya and Singapore and Australia. But I think, being about almost 70 countries now, I think you really feel at home in London for a whole range of reasons. So personal life, professional life, the global outreach. I genuinely don't think there's any other city in the world that gives you that. And I think you can genuinely feel yourself here. And I had to go back to Australia and come back again a few times to realise that, but it certainly is home now.
Yeah, so you describe yourself as a boomerang, Brett. But what do you think it is about London that keeps drawing you back?
Well, I think professionally, it's really, as I say, nowhere else in the world really competes with it. It's really unsurpassed, actually, in terms of what we do in the built environment, in sort of urban partnerships. We don't have all the answers here, and I'm sure we'll dive into a bit of that. But I think we are generally ahead of the curve, not behind the curve, which is exciting. I think personally, though, I think the network, and we sometimes dismiss the amount of culture and international sort of people that we have in this city, and it's a very accepting city, I think, as well, to live and to work. So I think both ticks the personal and the professional as well, and that's why back to Australia, back to London, back to Australia, back to London seems to be a repeating trend in my life, but definitely here now.
And what do you think London's taught you that you've applied to Sydney, and also vice versa, what Sydney taught you that you apply to London?
It's interesting. I mean, we'll probably talk about some other cities I've been and worked in as well, like Singapore and others. But I think when I got to Sydney for this role, we'll talk about business improvement districts probably, because I've been involved in those for a couple of decades. But I was quite surprised how parochial, I say this with great respect to my Australian friends and colleagues, but the fact they couldn't get beyond their own ownership, their own asset, and a real divide between the public and private sector that I've not seen in other countries and cities. And I think perhaps in London or the UK, because the industry and private sectors had to step in a lot more in urban regeneration and development and regen, where I think Australia's had pretty wealthy balance sheets in the public sector. They've not had to work in the same way. But it was quite striking going down, setting up the first business improvement district in the waterfront, and just culturally shifting both the politicians and the owners and the developers and businesses to really genuinely collaborate. That was a big learning point. On the flip side, I think Australia's done an amazing job in environmental work, in sustainability, in the built environment. We've got Neighbours, not the show you watch, but obviously the rating and on carbon. I think they're probably ahead of the curve in us in some of the work in carbon emissions and design.
I think it's interesting. We had Martin Evans on last week from Landsec, and he was talking about like a very similar thing, thinking beyond the red line.
Yeah.
And I think that, from our perspective as architects working mainly in London, it is hard to do. And it's hard to get people to do that, particularly if the public sector aren't involved. Yeah. If it is just, so we're working on some master plans which have got multiple landowners, getting people to think beyond the red line is very challenging. But you think that London is better than other cities at doing that?
Well, it's interesting, your observation on that. I think we're better and we've evolved. So I think about when we started out doing improvement districts 20 years ago, that was sort of breaking the cycle of, breaking the red line where the magic happens, where you come together, public and private. I think there's more to do, but I think as sort of the social environmental impact and the needs of London have evolved as well, we've seen a softening of the edges of people coming together. I think London's quite unique. There's a real mix of different owners and different businesses, where in other parts of the world, you often have one dominant landlord. You have obviously sometimes the state or the city owning stuff, but we're a real mix here, from the great estates to the REITs, the developers.
So can you ask, in terms of that, where does Opportunity London fit within that kind of ecosystem? You've got, Town Hall, you've got boroughs, you've got different things. So could you explain a little bit more about that?
It's a really interesting genesis. I think a bunch of developers and politicians came back from MIPIM 3 years ago and said, look, we're really woeful at working to attract capital investment at scale. Everyone's competing against each other. So sort of contradicting what I said earlier, actually. But I think there was a view that if we're going to really scale the next 100 billion of investment, we're going to have to work much better, both public, private sector, across the asset classes, join the dots up, and really just have an entry point into London as a global investor coming into the market here or wanting to expand here. So that was the genesis of Opportunity London. It's really evolved in the 18 months that I've been heading it up, and we can talk a bit more about that, obviously. But I think the principle where the magic can happen is basically breaking down those red lines, collaborating genuinely, and getting outcomes, whether it's financial or social and environmental, because of that work together.
So could you explain the model? How does it work? How are you funded, or how are you set up? Who are you, as an organisation?
Can be complex, can't it?
Yeah.
So basically we're a partnership, public and private sector. So we work with the Mayor's office, all 32 boroughs in the City of London, and they give us a bit of our funding. But majority, we have about 50 industry partners. So across the REITs, the owners, across the asset classes, so from resi, commercial, life sciences, institutions. There's about 2 or 3 investors and developers in each asset class working together, and we are pan-London.
Yep.
And the one job we have is a matchmaker. We're matching capital with schemes to get funded. And an investor comes to us. I was with some Koreans this morning. They've got a couple of $100 million. Nice checkbook here to invest in London. They want a certain asset class. They want a certain return. They want this sort of JV structure. Within our pipeline of both on and off market opportunities, we can match that. And the great thing about the model is we're not an advisor charging a fee. So we're generally agnostic in terms of the advice we give, independent, and we're not charging a fee that gives us incredible access to our investors. So about 600 investors on our books now that we're talking to all the time on behalf of London.
So are the kind of Savills, are the big estate agents of the world looking at you guys going, get off our patch?
More complementary. I think they will do the deep due diligence. They will work on specific sites. We're really upstream more. So we're just starting at that top level to actually do the matchmaking, do the introduction. Someone said we're London's Cupid, effectively.
Yeah.
So imagine me with wings flying around London trying to do this matchmaking. But I think, we need the agents, we need the architects, we need the law firms, we need everyone in the built environment community supporting us. And I think because we're non-threatening, we're able to unlock almost 600 million in the last 12 months for London, and we want to get to $1 billion this year.
That's really exciting. I think, sometimes we've seen in the last few years, there's a real optimism in London maybe 10, 15 years ago. And in some ways, some of that shine was taken off. Paris got the more recent Olympics. Yes. Paris has got a lot of media attention. Yeah. And how do you still feel London's at the top of the class? What do we need to be doing to sort of maintain that top level sort of performance?
Let's say we're in the top 3.
Yeah.
So I think depending on the league table, it sort of varies as well.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, let's not forget about the Brexit and what's happened in the last sort of 15, 20 years in London as well. I think from a real estate investment point of view, the numbers back this up. We are still the most traded global real estate city in the world. Pre-COVID, there was about 25 billion that we were transacting. We're about 14 billion last year, but we're still number one. And the fundamentals, so, the rule of law, the liquidity, the diversity, the opportunities, and just the sheer scale of London puts us in a different category, which is why you've got investors from North America, Far East, Middle East coming here. But there's challenges. And when we think about perhaps some of the issues around the planning, around the time it gets schemes delivered, you've got to work London long sometimes. And I say this all the time to the politicians, global capital has a choice. Where does it want to deploy, which asset class? And for us in the real estate built environment world, we want to win that war. So London is up in the top of the league table, but there's friction and things we need to get better if we're going to keep those flows of capital coming.
When we see, world-class infrastructure like the Elizabeth line coming in, I think that it is a bit of a game changer. You go there and you think, wow, yes. Right? And I think one of the challenges we hear, and I'll give away, I'm a Londoner, so I'm biased, but often the regions are complaining London's gobbling up all the money. Yeah. And actually, if we're going to compete with New York, Tokyo, Paris, how do we balance those needs?
It's interesting. I think even different parts of one borough think their competition is over the road, actually. Yeah. So we've got to keep lifting it. And you're right, our competition is not Manchester, Birmingham, Edinburgh. They are all part of the ecosystem here. One stat you and your listeners should just remember forever is 90% of the investment, foreign direct investment coming through London, goes out to the rest of the country through an ecosystem. So we are generating wealth and investment for the country. So our competition is Singapore, Paris, parts of the US, what's happening in the Middle East. And I think we've got to constantly remind ourselves that. And it was great to be at UK Reef actually partnering Manchester, but the competition is certainly not each other in London or around the country, it's global.
Yeah. You spoke about UK Reef. We went there as well, and public-private partnerships seem to be the kind of the hot topic. What have you learned? What are some of the challenges around making them work?
Yeah, it was a good show because actually I hadn't been before, so I'd been back
we
in
like
Australia.
UK Reef. We were doing podcasts up there.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah.
It was incredible actually. I mean, last year I heard it was rained out, right? But this year the sun was back in Leeds.
Yeah, it was good.
Comparing it to MIPIM, I don't think they're comparable because they're a different group of people and different conversations, I think. And for the policymakers and the industry, I think it was really enriching, genuinely, and some really good conversations. I think people were quite candid up there. I found whether during the private discussions on some of the panels, talking about some of the issues, quite frankly. But we quickly moved to, Building Safety Act, whatever it is, to, well, what are the solutions, right? We all want to try and win this. So I felt it was a quite enriching, enlightening conversation. We're definitely going to invest the time and energy to go there. And I think it's a good platform for all of us to come together annually. I hope it doesn't move from Leeds. I mean, I love Liverpool, but I think there's something quite special about Leeds, isn't there?
I thought it was great this year.
We're locked in.
I think the year after next there might be a move. That's what I heard. But what about public-private partnerships? How do you make them work?
Look, that is the exam question of the century. I think that's what we're trying to do. There's some really good examples. Like one of our partners is Related Argent up in Brent Cross Town. They did an incredible piece with Barnet Council up there in terms of the housing and the regen. What was really encouraging was the risk they took together, thinking about equity into the schemes, different types of risk. It wasn't such a structured black and white partnership. They went in together. They've learned along the way. They've probably made some mistakes along the way, but it's actually really coming to fruition now, that scheme. I think in this role, we have projects which are both public and private sector owned, generally over 100 million plus type schemes. With the public sector, and that's the local authorities, the mayoral development corporations and others, we have to do a bit more heavy lifting to help them get investor ready and get them to think a bit differently about their risk appetite, how they pitch to investors. But we're really investing that time. We sit with industry experts, we sit with the bankers and advisors to help our local authority partners get investor ready with some of their projects. Because if they get to market and get investment, London wins, quite frankly. So that, I think, is the genesis of how the public-private partnerships are going to evolve in London.
Related Argent are an interesting example because they're now American owned effectively.
Yes.
And I have heard some American owners going, do you know what, we can't be dealing with this planning system. Like that has been an attitude. I don't want to attribute it exactly to Related, but I have heard from other people involved with American investors that are like, this is too long, it's too slow, there's other cities I can go to, there's other places I can put my money where it'll be returned to me faster.
Yes.
Is that something that you're seeing in your 18 months of going around the world and pitching London?
There is not one conversation where either planning, power or politics doesn't come up with an investor. And there's different degrees of risk on that as well. I think there is a structural issue for London in terms of the pace of delivery sometimes. Capital needs to get to work and those investors need to see a return. And I was with one, I won't name them, but it was a data center investor and operator, pretty big, starts with an M. And it took them 12 years from finding a site to PCing and opening. We can't take that long, where it might take them 2 years in the US to do something similar. So, look, I think the politicians have got the memo. I think they're generally trying to work differently, but I think those local authorities in London, we work with all of them, including the City of London, those that can get ahead of the pace, the planning. Don't know if they can fix the power. I think that's probably more national government, but I think those that are really going to give the confidence and de-risk will be able to unlock some of those billions that we need for the capital.
And how does the relationship with yourselves and the City Hall work, the GLA, because they have a job kind of looking over London as well?
Yeah, I think because we're one removed, we can sort of have those conversations with investors that perhaps off-market origination, where if you're the authority, it's harder to get into those because there's obviously procurement and planning stuff that goes around.
There's legally, they are authority rather than being a middle organisation.
Yeah, and I think also they have their own lands. They've got to think about their probity in that process. So I think the reason the mayor and the boroughs backed Opportunity London will enable us to do that as well. But really important partner. And I was really pleased to see Sadiq down at MIFIM actually.
Yep.
I really worked hard personally, sort of over 9 months to sort of really, no, not lobby, but certainly encourage the mayor to get down there and fly the flag. And
Did he enjoy it? That was his first time, wasn't it?
He absolutely loved it. I mean, he came back and sort of said, look, I think he was surprised by the reception. Given the weather, maybe that helped because actually
Yeah, it was
he was inside a lot, but it was pretty warm when we were seeing him as well. But I think, I think he really understood the market, and I think the fact that the market really welcomed the mayor down there with the local authorities, we had about 6 local authority leaders as well, really showed a joined up London. So hopefully we'll see more of the mayor doing that in the future.
I think so. I think because there's always been a nervousness, I suppose, in recent years of local authorities and the mayor to be seen in MIPIM, having a glass of champagne. But actually, we need to be out there getting that investment. So I think there's sort of 2 ways of looking at it. And I think I was personally quite pleased. I didn't know he was coming. Then it sort of rippled through Sadiq's here. And I think that really, it did buoy things. Oh, we're back in business. London's, pushing. It was good.
I think also, we remember Ken Livingstone used to go down, Boris used to go down. So
it used to be the standard, but also the local authorities have stopped going. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why UK Reef's winning.
Yes.
Now, if you're UK based and you want to spend your money on a property event, yes, you might not have global investors coming to Leeds, but you do have reliably senior planners, senior officers, and leaders of the council all flocking there. Whereas it's hard for them to justify south of France still.
I think what I'd say is for a local authority that's got a scheme that's ready and they need the money, they should still think about MIPIM. But obviously, we're there on their behalf. We are funded by the boroughs to start doing that brokerage and help them. But I think there's still virtue with some of the investors and the scale of investors at MIPIM as well.
Is there a danger, and this is a controversial question, in going around the world sort of showing global investors the schemes that still need funding in London, that you're making London appear like it doesn't have funding?
Yes and no. And I think the good story is we're getting deals through, investment is happening. We can point to lots and lots of transactions in the last sort of 18 months, 2 years. But some of these schemes are long-ended, and they're going to require different types of capital, patient capital, different risks. I think what's very encouraging is the partnership with the Crown Estate and Lend-Lease that was announced a couple of weeks ago. I think the Crown Estate is effectively, it's Clear Interest, one of our partners as well, but it is effectively our sovereign wealth fund. $2.5 billion funding facility on some really big regen projects in the capital, Royal Docks, Euston. That, I think, will give a very strong market confidence to other sovereign institutional money around the world that London is open, it can get these schemes delivered. And I think, let's see what happens with the comprehensive spending review, which is coming up. But I think we're going to have to find new ways to fund our infrastructure, whether it's energy or transport, and that's going to require overseas capital in a lot of instances. So we need to start delivering on some of these partnerships.
You talk a lot about the sort of 100 billion that you're raising. What is that 100 billion for?
I think it's a target, it's a North Star. So I think we look back on the last 10 years and actually London did secure 100 billion in foreign investment. You think about King's Cross, for example, what Battersea with the Malaysians, even MTR on the Elizabeth line, which is from Hong Kong. So, we're well versed there. So we picked a number. It's always good to have a North Star. But I think it does focus our minds in terms of the projects and the schemes. And Opportunity London, there's only 8 of us. So we're a lean machine. We're operating on a couple of million a year. We've got our partners. So we need to be really focused on the value of the projects we're working behind. But I think focusing everyone's mind on getting deals funded and delivered is the core mission for Opportunity London.
So we've got the spending review formally coming out in a few days, and there's various leaks and commentary in the press about whether or not there'll be enough for London. What do you think London needs?
No, I think it's encouraging where the government's got to in terms of really looking at sort of PPPs or PFI financing, because some of the big projects, it can't fund it on balance sheet, which is good. I hate that there's always this pitting of London against the country. I think as Londoners, we all get a bit tired of that, don't we, as well? Sort of levelling up. We had that in the last administration. I generally think the mayor, the boroughs and the government are united on this, but there's only so much the government can invest. So if we're not going to get everything funded, and I hope the DLR is the top of the list, we've had the Euston announcement as well. Those transport projects will unlock huge amount of housing for us in the capital. But if they can't give us the money through grant and spending, then we've got to find other models which require maybe TIFs, PPPs, whatever they are, to get more of the market investment into London, which hopefully we'll see some signs on that.
What does a TIF mean?
This week. Tax increment financing.
Okay, similar to PFI, or is it a different sort of?
Similar. It's Battersea Power Station, the Northern Line was one of the first TIFs we did. So sort of upfront funding effectively, and obviously there's a payback, and the US.
Is that, so the Bakerloo
does a
line
lot.
is similar because that's developers incrementally funding the Bakerloo line. Is that a similar example?
Could be. So not to date, but I think the campaign for Bakerloo line extension is exactly that. Could use a TIF model like the Northern Line in Battersea to fund that as well. So I think we're all trying to find innovative ways, and people like PwC and Lloyds, who are our partners as well, are helping us think around this.
If you were playing top trumps with London's potential infrastructure projects, you've said that you think the DLR's top. Can you rank? I mean, Bakerloo line extension is my favourite because I live in Camberwell. Yeah. So that's kind of
everyone's got a wish list.
Yeah, exactly.
Crossrail 2.
What's your order of importance? Because you've got Crossrail 2, you've got Bakerloo line.
You've mentioned them all. I think so my top four are basically the DLR, you said Bakerloo line, something called Western Orbital out in the west, which is sort of linking up to Heathrow, a number of stations there. And I think we shouldn't dismiss Crossrail 2 in terms of, we've got a lot of sites that are locked up for that as well. That could unlock a huge amount of residential north-south of London. And then you've got obviously Euston and HS2 as well.
That seems really such a crucial one to, otherwise it's such a lot of wasted money to not connect.
It will definitely happen. Old Oak as well. And I actually was talking with government and some of the partners around Euston, like Crown and Lendlease and others around that. So we're pretty confident. But you've named them. But I think rather than talk about them, we've got to deliver. But this government, to be fair, they've announced Heathrow, haven't they? They announced nuclear energy. So I think they're definitely in the infrastructure game. I just think we've got to find the third-party capital behind some of these projects.
So with all of that, where do you see the future of London in, say, 2035?
Interesting. I was sitting at Canary Wharf this morning, and we were sort of thinking back, to the 90s and what happened then in Docklands, and sort of 30 years on, 35 years on, and we were saying, what will Canary Wharf be in 2030, 2040? And I think for London, and genuinely that sort of mixed use, that is all types of uses, all different types of sort of public realm that supports that. I think we're definitely in that direction, and we haven't seen it at scale yet, but I think what they're going to do at Canary Wharf, what we're going to see in other parts of the capital, we will become the poster child globally of mixed use. I'm going to see a lot more density, I would imagine, a lot more greening, hopefully fewer cars through the capital, all stuff that we want. But London, 2,000 years, we keep evolving, don't we? And I think we lead the world, not follow the world. And I think we're going to see more of that in the future.
So on a day-to-day basis, what does your job entail? Or I suppose, I'd imagine it's varied on every day, but you've got a small team. So you in kind of with your sleeves rolled up, doing deals, traveling a lot. What does the day look like for you?
Exactly that. I mean, we're about to wheels up next week for 5 weeks in the US, Canada and Australia, selling London to the world. Sort of no day is, the same actually. Sort of last year I spent the whole year visiting every single London borough. And just really understanding the leadership, the vision, the policy, what they wanted. That was utterly fascinating.
Which is your favourite?
Londoner. You can't ask me that. I'll give you my top 5 for planning in terms of...
See if it aligns with us, Top 5 in terms of planning. What are your top 5 London boroughs? top 5 London boroughs to work with for planning.
We're not going public with that. But I think what was really fascinating was just I have a whole new respect for local government. I mean, these planners want to do good. These politicians really want to deliver, right? So it sort of motivates us as well. But look, we're selling London. We're building the pipeline. We're advocating. I think we're a busy team, but we're focused, and that's part of the job as well. And we're sort of crossing the politics and the investor all the time, and I find that really interesting as a role.
I find pick up on one of the things you said earlier, what I'm finding really interesting at the moment, we're doing quite a lot of work in the City of London now, and there's been a real, lot of people wanting to move back to the square mile, and then that's been hard for Canary Wharf, but then Canary Wharf's reinventing itself, and it's quite exciting, that ecosystem within London, that these two kind of great areas with different things are kind of constantly reinventing themselves.
Yeah, completely. And I think, you're seeing it all around the capital in terms of changes of use as well. But I think the big iconic schemes with network rail property, so whether it's Euston, Waterloo, Victoria, I think and Liverpool Street in the city, actually, I think the change of use and what those projects will do, it's about 10 billion in those sort of 4 schemes as well. Yeah, I think they're sort of a catalyst of the changes going on in the capital. I think what also is interesting is, I think you in architects and design is, what are the buildings being used for, and how are we repurposing them for different uses? And I don't know, this idea that planning and use is so rigid. We've got to think, actually, it could be resi today, but it might be life sciences tomorrow, and it could be an office, or it might change. And I think we've got to, I'm sure you look at this all the time, how do we design that into our buildings?
Well, it's an interesting conflict, because I think if you step back and look at what the aims of this government are, like they've got a housing crisis and a sort of energy/sustainability crisis.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to prioritise those policies, what you want to do is make it as easy to repurpose buildings as possible. But if you work as an architect on a day-to-day basis, you will find the planning departments are not set up to share that flexible attitude, right? It's got a use class, and if you want to change that use class, it's quite tricky often, particularly like the loss of commercial. And we're not talking the middle of the city of London. No. Actually, the city of London are quite relaxed about changing offices.
Well, within
parameters they are, compared to some other boroughs.
And,
I can
hotels and other things.
That's important, but like Islington, very, very, very tricky to change office space into anything that isn't office space.
Yeah.
But there's not as much demand for it. And I think we've got to like step back and align our local policies to the real challenges that we've got.
Totally.
So my question, and this is a very rambling, question, is if you kind of had a magic wand for policies that you could change, what would be the ones that like made it easier for you to go and pitch London?
I think rather than being prescriptive, I think I would say, what was really interesting, I used to work in the West End company, which is all the retail and hospitality across Bond Street, Regent Street, Ox Street and Mayfair. And use Class E, which is kind of the ground floor use, actually. And we saw all the department stores change. You've seen them now, actually, haven't you? The sort of boulevard of mixed use. I think taking that model, perhaps, in across different asset classes of, so flexibility, you got there yourself, actually. But I think, but maybe there's some sort of zoning. Maybe we think about the London plan, and I think it's difficult because governments want to think about policy of the future, not just today. Markets need to respond to what's going to drive profitability and that. But I think there is a Venn diagram where the magic can happen, but some more agility, a bit more risk taking, a bit more pace to innovation in uses, I think, is what we need to see in London.
I totally agree. There's a new publication of the London plan coming out soon.
Yes.
I've not read through the draft, but it tends towards becoming more prescriptive rather than less, in the way that lots of things do. So we'll have to see.
We promise it won't be an 800-page document. So let's see.
Good. Is it getting shorter this time? That's good.
Yeah.
Jace,
I think what I'd like to see a bit more just on that is some of the boroughs working together a bit more collectively. Yeah. So we've been looking at housing for London. We've been looking at energy and transport. Some of these need cross-borough working. I think that those red lines we spoke about are difficult. Some are really getting it, actually, and understanding that. So I would hope in this next wave we're going to see some more collaboration across boroughs, particularly in energy projects. Islington's done some amazing work there, but I think we could scale some of this stuff for the future.
And energy and cycling, I think. Cycling.
Yeah, we went to a launch, we went to a launch across the tri-borough
Tri-Wizarding competition.
Tri-Wizarding, which is up Waltham Forest.
Oh yeah.
Haringey, Enfield.
And Enfield. And they were really trying to push their collaboration, but it sort of seems to be little groups doing different bits of things. But I think that was really positive too. Yeah.
I agree.
And is that something that you think you're is the role of Opportunity London going to change, do you think? So you're the publicist of London essentially at the moment, but do you think it might expand and try to do other things like encourage more interaction between the boroughs, do some more kind of lobbying for central government? Are those other sort of wings that you might expand into?
I think our pipeline work is much deeper. So you see all the sort of public stuff and promoting London and the deals, but actually there's quite a lot of work, and we work with ARAP and JLL and others to actually deep dive into the local authorities of how they can scale investment. So the quality of the projects I spoke about, we're playing a much more active role in that. And I think we've been doing some work for the last 18 months on a housing fund for London, but that principle, which could be 5 billion potentially, unlocked for 20,000 homes, pooled capital, almost borough agnostic, funding projects that are very close and ready to go, but actually this bit of extra equity would get them over the line. So that's really interesting. Working with one of your clients, actually, on thinking about this as well. Major Housing Group Association.
They've got a few different entities. Major Housing Association is the housing association part of it.
So I think for Opportunity London, we will definitely play a role with London and Partners and the Mayor's Office in thinking about energy, transport, data centres for the capital, some of these areas where we need to scale, because that's going to unlock investment. We'll be doing more of that in the future. We don't lobby because the nature of how we're set up is we don't publicly sort of criticise our friends in politics and sort of policymakers, but we sit with the leaders, the Mayor's Office, government all the time to give them intelligence on what investors telling us, and I think there's value in us doing that and having honest conversations behind closed doors.
Jace, that's been amazing. Thank you very much. It's been great to have you on.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in.